Hi there, and thank you for tuning into the Social Circus, where every week we dive into a variety of topics covering social media, mindset, and how to run your business. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Today I am joined by Tracy Amara Smith. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Sarah. How are you going?
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today because before we hit record, we had a little chat off and I was like, oh, I must hit record. We're coming to some juicy stuff. So if my audience doesn't know who you are, Tracy is the owner and founder of Silverdale Natural Therapies, and she has a range of skills and experience that helps us really tap into finding out who we are and connecting with ourselves. So Tracy, I might let you give us a little bit of background on your journey into your business and kind of your journey into self-discovery, really.
Well, my journey into self-discovery came from, basically not having the best setup as a kid. However, my journey really started when I supported my father through his death, and I utilized flower essences to help him, was originally to help him navigate chemotherapy through his treatment for liver cancer. And then it became quite obvious that he was moving into palliative care. My father and I had quite an estranged relationship, and we were able to connect through the flower essences. And it was at that time I came into my own. And when he passed, I really stepped forward in my mindset that this was my path and this is what I truly wanted to do. There've been an incredible amount of inner healing since that time, and always is. It never stops. There are always layers to the onion that we always, especially in business, we always seem to come up against things that prevent us from moving forward. So we're retraining our central nervous system and shifting our mindset so we can move forward and create something of a really incredibly strong foundation that's, here for the long haul, not just for the short term.
Oh, that's so true. And thank you for sharing that beautiful story. Now, if people haven't heard of flower essences, can you give us a little overview of what those are?
Sure. So I work predominantly with women with chronic pain and remedial health issues. And when we are in times of really deep pain, loss, or going through a real strong sense of a shift in identity, flower essences, which are the healing energy encapsulated from a certain flower. I use predominantly West Australian and Australian flower essences. So flowers are distilled in water, and it may sound strange, but flowers then release their healing consciousness within that water, and the water becomes a stock essence. It's a very deeply intuitive way to support people. Plants and nature are incredibly healing, and they are the great attractors. You'll always notice if you're walking in the bush, a flower will attract you, or nature attracts us, especially when we're feeling exhausted. Nature is the best elixir, and flower essences work on that same frequency and vibration because they are of nature. I like to call them the bush in a bottle. And also, when we are going through really deep times, especially with grief, our central nervous systems are can become quite hypervigilant. We can become even deeply more intuitive when we're going through times of crisis, and the flower essences are tuned to that energy and help to calm the central nervous system and also to calm the mind so we don't move into deep patterns of mental looping. And we don't create more. There's a tendency when we're in pain to create more drama, so we're able to release that crap out of our system. The flower essences help us to stay in our own lane and also own our healing and own the empowerment that it's bringing us. Because especially grief will show us the crap in our life. or loss will show us the crap in our life. When we're moving into, especially with business, when we're up leveling and everything seems new, the first thing that the mind will go to is elements of self-doubt. And this is when esteem issues can arise. So the flower essences really nip that in the bud and help the mind to create a new healing pathway. It's very much working in conjunction and in harmony with the central nervous system and the body. So it's body, mind and spirit. So I don't just work with flower essences, I work with in Bowen therapy as well, and a range of other tools. So you could say that that is intuitive healing, because when women especially come in, there's a natural affinity that I know exactly what they need. However, the empowerment is within them, because I'm simply guiding them to that wise part within themselves. When we release pain out of the body, there is this natural out breath, and that's what we look for. And when there's a natural out breath, people will naturally connect to themselves, and that's where the wisdom sits within.
Oh, it's such a beautiful explanation. And for everyone listening, I am a big fan of Tracy, and I'm a big fan of her flower essences. And we were just discussing one that she's recently made for me that I've been using for my own grief. But I wanted to talk last year, I was going through a particularly difficult time in my personal life, and things were very hectic and chaotic in my business, as often is the case when things feel hard. And I know that, Tracy, I worked with you and you did a custom bushflower essence for me. And I guess what I'd like to kind of touch on for people is that one of the wonderful things about these is you just take them and you don't necessarily have to do anything, which I think is really special.
However, you do.
Well, not actively, because it does.
Well, no, we'll see, because it's what it's doing is it's attuning, because it's energetic in nature. It's attuning to what you naturally have, and each flower essence has its own individual job, in inverted commas. So it's not necessarily about doing anything. You're still having to be open to the experience.
Oh, sorry. Yes, definitely, obviously.
and still open to accepting and receiving healing. So when we're actively taking the flower essences, we're openly saying, I am open to healing. And when we're open to healing, the flowers do their job. So within a small space in time, they're so subtle in how they work. You just all of a sudden you feel, oh my goodness, I feel supported. My mind isn't racing. I'm not feeling overwhelmed. They are incredible, especially when we're feeling super sensitive.
And I think for a lot of the listeners who are business owners, we have times when, like you said, when we're up leveling, or when business is changing, or we're becoming more visible and that we feel vulnerable. The things like the flower essences are a great tool to help with that. So I know that you talked that you would deal a lot with grief and pain, but the flower essence also come into their own when we're going through those transition periods.
The transitional periods are the penultimate in ways to help body, mind, spirit connection, because sometimes there's a tendency we can also hide within our business rather than dealing with life, in inverted commas. So business can be like a bit of an escape, and when we hit up against certain blocks within our business, it's time to look at life, and vice versa. So those transition phases aren't independent, they're interdependent of each other. And when we get to those times, it is the wisdom to stop, look and listen and reconnect. And the work I do, especially when we're up leveling, connecting to the body and allowing times of rest rather than constantly doing. Resting is still doing, but in a feminine, an internal way, whereas you're still listening to yourself. You know what you need to do, but if you get constantly hitting up against something, when we stop and do something else or look after ourselves, solutions come easily and we come into a new flow. So transitional times are times to maybe take the foot off the accelerator and work ways in more of a creative mindset rather than do, got to get this done mindset.
Oh, I love that. That's such great advice. So when you talk about rest, because this is something I've genuinely worked so hard on because I've been appalling at it in the past, it's something I struggle with because I feel like as a society we've become obsessed. We don't, when someone says, "How are you?" we no longer say well or good. We say busy. And so it's almost like this badge of honor that we wear to be busy. And there's a lot of external pressures to make us feel like we're constantly doing. So when we rest, I find it incredibly hard. and I'm just it's a like constant effort to kind of do that. So if we were to kind of step away from our business, which sometimes feels counterintuitive when we are actually busy, what are some good activities that we could try that would help us to, like you say, connect with our creativity, genuinely rest, and things that you like?
Well, it is a challenge to shift gears when the brain and the mind are completely on, because you do have to be on in your business. And I know this sounds really out there, but colouring in is scientifically proven to shift the brain from a stress or busy state into a calm one. So there's a transitional phase that if you get your colour pencils out and start colouring in or even journaling, we can shift the mind and the body in from a stress state to a calm one. There's a great scientist, I can't remember his name, it's Colour Station is his website, and there's science to prove that colouring in is a great way to bring in that sense of calmative and to shift gears. Ooh. They have colouring stations at Apple and Google and some of the big brands in order to support executives that need to shift out of one mindset and into another, and accessing that intuitive, because business is now becoming more and more intuitive. And as people are becoming more socially conscious, the embodiment of what we love and value need to be integrated within the system. Otherwise, there is this mismatch. And I think that's what's happening within life, in inverted commas, at the moment, is that we're realizing that we are more than what we do. There needs to be an element of what I want to be.
Oh, I love that. That's so true. I've never actually heard it explained like that, because I've had a tackle at colouring in, and I find myself being such a perfectionist, and so especially when my children were younger and they would colour, I'm like, no. So even that can be a challenge to kind of rest our brain and just go with things. It can be really, really interesting. And oh, sorry.
Oh, no, there's heaps of, exercise, just hanging with friends, being in the garden. It's just, you will find that element that helps you shift gears. It's a personal thing. Healing is very intimate and personal. So there is no rule book. You get to choose. So, but the choice is, okay, I'm exhausted. This isn't working. I have to stop. What can I do? What nourishes me? And you step from there.
And those are wonderful questions to ask. What can I do? What nourishes me? And I suspect that most of us don't ever ask ourselves that question, because we're just we're on this treadmill of go, go, go. And so when we stop, we just collapse with exhaustion. And actually, that's almost not resting, because we're beyond able to do anything, aren't we? And it's a really interesting mindset. So if you're listening to this and you think, when was the last time you asked yourself, what can I do to nourish myself? I'm ashamed to say I don't know when I last asked myself that, which is terrible. And it's nice, Tracy, that you mentioned trying to find those other activities if you're into gardening or if you're into exercise. I've really I've got a jigsaw on the go all the time.
Yeah,
and I try, and whenever I'm actually walking past it, I try and stop and do a couple of pieces. And I find that there's a little bit of satisfaction in it, because I enjoy that. There's a kind of like I've got a piece in and things, but it's quite mindful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's balancing the do with the mindfulness. It sounds so cliched, or the doing with the rest. The two, that's how we bring a sense of I'm not saying balance, because sometimes it is all about the work, but it doesn't necessarily have to take over our lives. There
Yes.
needs to be, integrative times, and I get a lot of women that book in just for this hour, just so they can stop. And an hour a month isn't very much. However, to them in their mindset, they come in here, the phone is in the car, and they completely and utterly shut down and get what they need to connect with themselves to move forward. So
Wow.
it's such an individual thing. It's something that journaling is a great way to find that.
Yes.
But it's allowing the time and making those choices.
Yes, and I've been trying to do a lot more journaling. It kind of segues us into, because I had the pleasure of attending Tracy's flower immersion the other night, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that experience. So Tracy runs the flower immersion classes once a month online, and like you said, it's an hour of beautiful, deep connection and meditation. So Tracy, I have to say, when I booked it, I had no idea what to expect. So can you tell us all a little bit about what a flower immersion is?
So the flower immersion is a great way for me to showcase the benefits and the wonderful healing properties of nature, particularly native flowers. So we start it. I've actually created it for this reason, to help people stop and take time out for themselves to connect. What makes this unique is that the meditations are created with the connections of being grounded within the earth and nature itself. So it's very strong visualizations, and also opening our systems up to a greater intuitive force other than our brain. And there's a beautiful co-creation with that and the flowers. So like I say, you attract the flowers. So flowers will come within the front of our mind. So there's two parts to the immersion: is the meditation and the journaling section, and then I'll showcase, I'll intuit a flower for the group for that night. So on Monday night we had the beautiful bottle brush, which is an essence to support us through the transition in life. It's also very much attuned with the mother energy, which is about nourishment and nurturing. And it really supports us when we feel like we're failing to thrive. It's very good for kids or babies that find it hard to attach when they're first born. So the flower essence is very sensitive on that level, but you can actually feel the essence of that flower coming through the videos and the pictures that I've taken, and understanding, how it grows, the doctrine of signatures of what it actually looks like, gives us an indication of the healing qualities that it offers. And I just think it's just such a beautiful thing to offer, to connect us back into nature. And I think we need that more than anything now. We have our intuitive faculties. We just need to tune into them more and be grounded in that process.
Yeah, and I absolutely, I found the experience, I'm going to use the word almost magical, because I think I mentioned to you, I had probably one of the best meditative experiences I've ever had. And probably I'm an appalling sleeper, and I had a wonderful night's sleep that night. But I also, the next morning when I woke up, I turned to my husband and said, shall we go for a walk? Because I felt like I just wanted to we live across the road from some bush, so we're really lucky. And we just had this beautiful walk, and I felt very aligned with myself. And I felt like I then went into a very busy day, and I felt great. And I'm not quite articulating it, but the sense that I'd kind of almost reset my nervous system. And oh gosh, help me out here, Trace. I'm struggling to articulate myself.
Well, yeah, no, you did it. You're doing it perfectly. And this is a big fat yes. This is the work. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You took an hour out of your life, could reset your central nervous system, connected with an inner part of your nature, move forward in life in a stressful way, and killed it. That's it. It doesn't have to be complicated.
And so I do want to just briefly mention, I'm mindful of time, and I know that you and I can talk all day, but as well as your flower immersion classes that you hold once a month, you do also have a wonderful podcast.
Yes, I released that this week. It's called the Bloom and Groove podcast. I've been wanting to do this for so long, and life has presented itself with me. I'm slowly easing in because there's so much to say about the work that I do. So I've released it this week to my list. I'm releasing it publicly next week because I want to add one more episode before I launch it out to the wider world. It's on Spotify and Apple, and on my website.
And what's the podcast called?
It's called the Bloom and Groove podcast.
Oh, what a great name, Bloom and Groove podcast. I'll pop it in the show notes so that everyone can access it. And I'm sure when people are listening to this, it'll be available everywhere. I have to say, I feel like listening to that podcast maybe ticks my self-care box a little bit each time I listen to it. Is that acceptable, Trace?
Absolutely. I love it.
And I think one of the things that I've learned from being friends with Tracy and working with Tracy is that in my mind, I often thought things like self-care and rest had to be these big chunks of things that were really hard to fit into my life. And now it's about finding these little beautiful moments to be kind and gentle to myself, to connect with nature, rather than you need to go away for a weekend, those kind of things. And I feel like I'm doing a much better job of it because I'm much more realistic about it now. So I do want to say thank you, Tracy. I have enjoyed the journey you've taken me on.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Sarah. Thank you.
My pleasure. So I hope that you've all enjoyed listening to Tracy and I chat about I'm going to call it the miracle of flower essences because I do think that. I'm such an advocate of them. I feel like they've supported me so much over the last few years in a wide range of different journeys that I've had to be going through. And I do hope that you're all inspired, having listened to Tracy's wonderful practical advice, to rest, maybe try out some colouring in, maybe try and connect with nature, and to listen more to what your body wants rather than to push it like it's a machine.
Yeah, we are human.
Yes, having a human experience. So yeah. Tracy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming and generously sharing your wisdom. I am so grateful. And yes.
Thanks, Sarah.
My pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll catch you all the same time next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Social Circus. As your host, Sarah Thompson, I am thrilled that you've chosen to spend your time hanging out with me. I would be so grateful if you could spare an extra moment to go and leave me a review on your favourite podcasting platform. And if you even felt more excited, you could share my podcast with your friends who you think would get great value from it. Thanks so much again for tuning in.